Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Boring Show with me, Philip, and Andrew. Today, we have a very special episode for you because it's even more experimental than normally. We have no idea what we're gonna build, but it's going to be about animation, which is something that a lot of people have asked about.
Yeah, we go through you guys post comments, we look at them, and one of the things that has come up over and over again is animations, people wanting to know more about them. And so that's where we got the idea for this episode. We're going to look at implicit animations.
Yes. Okay, let's start. Do we want to start with code or do we want to start
Maybe
with
we start with
definitions?
like what is an because
Yeah.
when I joined the team, somebody mentioned implicit animations like it was a thing I should just know, and I had no idea. Unfortunately, they were really nice and explained it to me. So an explicit animation is something like the folks at 2 Dimensions that are doing advanced animations like that, where you make an animation controller and you're like, this is going to go to here, and then it's going to morph into this, and then it's going to do this other thing, and it's very, very directed and potentially complicated, right?
Or looping, right? Looping animations is
There you
also
go.
explicit. Yeah.
Okay. Whereas implicit animations is just an animation that occurs between 2 states, sort of as if by magic. That's at least my definition of it.
Yes. So I think for example, when you change the size or anything about the floating action button, it actually, I think it's implicitly animated. So
Okay.
it will implicitly go into its space or like move, and it's not just like one frame, it will actually animate to the new position.
We did there's a demo that Matt liked to do where you embed the floating action button in the bottom navigation bar. If you like move the location, it just sort of like and then like
Yeah.
grows in the next spot, and you don't have to do any of that. It just does it for you implicitly, as it were. And so there's a ton of those scattered throughout Flutter. Like it happens a lot, but how do you make one of those is the thing that we're going to tackle today. Like how do you make your own implicit animation without a whole bunch of hassle? That's
Yes.
the idea.
So we are gonna. Okay, I have the wrong app running right now, but we're gonna still use our favorite Hacker News app, and we want to find a place in the Hacker News app that could be implicitly animated, as in like we just create a new widget or build a new widget with different settings, and it will animate from the previous settings to the new ones.
Which we don't really know how to do as of right now.
Yes, which is
Which
great.
is part of the fun. So
Yes. You know what? I'm just gonna kill this and start the app. So what are some things that people should know about? So animation is one. Animation is a class.
right.
Is that the most? Is that the like base class, or is there even more?
So when I've done animations before, like when I made that little reversey game, the thing that you had to start off with is an animation controller, right? So why don't we look that up, which I can use.
So today we have like I will be coding and Andrew will be showing the recommendation. And hopefully we'll be switch between
Yeah.
the two things
I'm taking notes.
Yeah. and taking notes.
Secretary for the project. So an animation controller. Let's see, what does it do? There's a lot, and it's an important class when there's this many comments. The code. So it's a controller for an animation. It can play an animation forward or backward. It can set the animation to a specific value, define the upper bound and lower bound, and create a fling. So when I've used one of these in the past, like the controller is the thing that goes from 0 to 1, and like 0 is the beginning of the animation, and 1 is the end of the animation, and like it's the thing that drives that whole process and like starts spitting numbers into one end of the animation chain. So there's that, and it also uses a ticker mix-in, which is another thing that like I saw in code examples early on, and I was like, I'll just copy this into my stateful widget. I wonder if we can figure out exactly what that does.
It's
a mix-in, isn't it?
It will, yeah, nice. Just one, really?
So provides a single ticker that is configured to only tick when the current tree is enabled. Okay, what's a ticker?
I think that's just something that will kind of call set state every frame.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so you have to, if you're going to do an animation, you don't want to just constantly be recalculating values, right? You only want to do it when you're about to draw a frame. And I know from talking to Ian, when he and I were talking about like the layers of Flutter, all the way at the bottom you have rendering. And rendering, there's a callback that you can hook into to say, please execute this function every time you're about to draw a frame. And that gives you a chance to rebuild so that you can then paint something on the next frame. And so that must be what ticker does.
Okay, so in the for us to not just like look at the documentation,
Yeah.
let's start building. So what
You start building. I'll take notes. We'll be good.
What we thought would be cool was according to what you select, either top stories or new stories, this title at the top of the app changes, right? And at first, the cool thing about implicit animation is that once you have that widget, you will just use it as any normal widget, and as we said, implicitly it will animate from one to another. So we can start with a simple widget that doesn't animate, right? So right now, this thing is just a text, which I need to first find, and it's this one, right? Text, Flutter, Hacker News. So I will, what's it gonna be called?
What are we going to animate it to do?
So I think we'll just give it either Flutter Hacker News or Flutter Hacker Tops.
Okay, so you want to change the string?
Yeah.
Do you want to start with something simpler and just like animate the color on a single string?
Okay.
And just do that and then see if we can get
sure.
fancy?
Sure. So, but like, what's gonna, so like headline?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
good.
So
Unless that's already a widget name or something. I don't think it is.
And current index would be the thing that we add to it, because that's gonna redraw. And
So
I'm just gonna be late. No, I'm not gonna be lazy and add two widgets, because we spent the last full hour kind of dealing with the technical debt that we had refactoring. So we actually right now I don't want to do more. So this is going to be the headline widget. And no, thank you. And it's gonna be a stateless at first. Let's start with stateless. Headline and material. And I think I said that in the constructor it takes string.
String and then the index.
Okay, so you know what? String. So string text. That's gonna be the final thing, and also final, that's weird, but index. And then we can do this text and this index. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is just text with the text and index. Very cool. And now
I think you got all the parameters in your constructor is optional.
Yes.
Which I don't think was how you were calling it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I'm gonna, but you're right about this one. It should have both right now. I'm gonna fix this. So where are we? Text. No text. And wow, I can type today.
That's most days for me. I wouldn't.
No, right. Yeah, that's right. That most days for me as well. So okay, I think we have this. Look. So now it just goes from 0 to 1. You say, right?
Hot reload for the win.
Awesome.
Now comes the complicated part. Actually,
yeah, okay.
something.
Let's just call it a
End
day.
of episode. We're done.
All right. So you're saying that we can animate between the two things. How do you do it? Is there a class for this, for implicit animations?
So yeah, I went looking, just before the episode, like we always do. There is, if you go look, let me go look at one real quick, like animated container. Because usually if I want to do something in Flutter, I just go look at how the people who've been working on the SDK do it. And so I believe if we look in here. So yeah, an animated container extends this other class, implicitly animated widget. So there's a base class for doing this that will hide away a lot of the actual work of setting up a controller and managing things like that. So let's go look at that. Implicitly animated widget. There we go.
You're very proficient in searching in
I have
Flutter.
my Chrome custom search engines
Oh, really?
set up. Yeah, so I have one for Flutter widgets. So you just you type FW in space, and then you give it the name of the widget, and it just searches the repo on GitHub for class.
Oh, that's so.
that
Can you
thing.
show it? Can you show it right now? Like the string, just for
Tweeted
inspiration.
it. It's
Well, never mind.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I'll tweet it again. I'll put it in the comments. We'll do something. It
yes.
is really useful.
Yes.
And so this is, this base class, an abstract widget for building widgets that gradually change their values over a period of time. Subclasses states, so it's stateful widget, must provide a way to visit the subclass's relevant fields to animate. Okay, so that makes sense. So we're going to define what it's actually animating, right? So it'll do the animation, but then we have to like tell it what you're animating from and to and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think, yeah.
So, all right. Let's do this. Our headline will not take an it can take an index, and it will change colors according to the index. If it's 0, it's black, and if it's 1, it's red. Okay. So you're saying implicitly
Animated
widget.
And is that a generic or anything? Or we good?
Create
Nope.
state. Oh, it's a stateful widget.
Oh, what state object do we need? Is there a base? Okay.
Okay, so let me first change to stateful widget. And now implicitly. So the thing that I did now is my IDE supports just like changing stateless widgets to stateful widgets and doing all the stuff here. Except it adds new, so okay. But that's helpful because implicitly animated widget is stateful, and so I don't need to do this all by myself. And now implicitly animated widget, and now screams. Isn't the valid override of implicitly animated widget? Oh, okay. So this state needs to be implicitly animated widget state.
Yes, which is further down in this file.
Okay.
I was just looking at.
Animated
So
widget
a base class for widgets with implicit animations, implicitly animated widget state, requires that subclasses respond to the animation themselves. If you would like set state to be called automatically as I like automatic things. If you would like set state to be called automatically as the animation changes, use animated widget base state.
Oh, so not implicitly, but animated widget based state.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
That's-
Ooh, no?
Well, you're not. I don't think you're. So you still gotta. Wait.
Animated widget base state. Okay. Animated widget base state.
I said it wrong. That's on me. There we go.
And okay, so two things here. First, the superclass implicitly animated widget expects a duration, which we don't have, but we can do it like this. So we might be able to kind of tell the widget the duration later, but right now, like just do duration of like 300 so that we see it. Okay, so that there was one thing, and
It's
then
probably yelling at us. There's some overrides, right?
for each tween. Wow.
Okay, this brings up a question. What is a tween? Because I see that all over the place, right?
Yeah.
You want to take a stab and I'll look it up?
Yes. Please. Yeah. Let's do all documentation on your machine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was going to say we should take a guess and then see what it actually is. Again, a lot of document. I love that they put all this. Look at this. This is like so much info. A linear interpolation between a beginning and an ending value. Tween is useful if you want to interpolate across a range. So chain tween objects together use it with an animation.
The easiest, let's show the easiest tween possible. Like tween between doubles is, well, I mean, it's probably just that double, right? But, or in tween, can you show it in tween?
Yeah, sure. Why am I looking up in the address bar? That's not where the code lives. There it is. So an int tween is between two integers and it rounds. So it's got a constructor and a method called lerp, and that's the entire class.
Right. So we should say what lerp is, linear interpolation. So that
It's not larping.
it's not LARPing.
Different thing.
It's not running around in with swords, but it's
Good exercise.
it's lerping, and you'll see this all over, right? Like lerp double, lerp everything.
Okay.
It's just like interpolating between two values.
So you give it a t, which
Which
is
is probably between 0 and 1.
Yeah, that's 0 to 1, and then it goes beginning plus some amount of the distance between the beginning and the end, and then it rounds it off. So like from 0, it would start at begin, and then at 1, it would be all the way at the end.
Right.
So you just go.
So like if I have a tween between 0 and 10, and I call lerp 0, then it's 0. If I lerp 1, then it's 10. And if I lerp something in the between, I don't want to do the math.
Like 0.5 is in the middle.
Yeah.
0.25 would get you 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this, we were talking about color earlier. Is there a color tween? Boom. There is in fact a tween for us to use. So color tween, same thing, basically, a constructor, and then oh, there's a color.lerp.
So many classes, this is the color.lerp is a static method. Many classes, including theme, have .lerp. So you can really, that's...
Theme has a .lerp?
Yeah, yeah. So you can do a lot of cool things with just lerping between pretty big amounts of data. I'm pretty sure, like, please check, but I'm pretty sure theme has lerp.
Oh, color comes out of Dart UI. Interesting. I can find theme, that's no problem. So it'd be theme data I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not mine. Because theme is the widget, I think, and theme data is actually the payload.
Mm-hmm. Does it have lerp?
Lerp. There it is.
Yep.
You're right. Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
But it's so cool. Like you can have like a very different, like you can have a dark mode and a light mode, and just changing that will automatically, because theme I think is implicitly animated as well. So you can like have a little.
That's literally 50 lines of lerps
Yeah.
for 867 and 916. Okay. All right. So we have.
So anyway, we're
Get
losing
back to our
focus
actual
here.
work, yeah.
So we just want to go from. I mean, we just want to build the animated widget, right? The implicitly animated widget. What the animated widget base state asks us to do is to implement the for each tween class. Method. What am I doing? And that method takes a tween visitor of dynamic. With like what? Like
I love the visitors that are in the SDK.
so what do we do?
Okay, so we're going to need a tween
Yes.
to define what's going to go from what to what, right? So if we're going to do colors to start, so we need a color tween.
Mm-hmm. Can I do this? Color tween.
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
Maybe we'll try it.
Tween.
Final until proven otherwise, right?
color tween. Between. So begin, let's say, is black. And is.
And is white? You want to do it that way? Or blue?
That's not gonna. Yeah, blue.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, and so the visitor, I can, so that we don't switch all the time, I'll look at the visitor here just for So okay, so it's a function that takes a tween, a target value, a tween constructor, and returns a tween. Okay. Okay. We need documentation.
Okay.
So what do we do with? Can you show animated widget base state, and what does it want us to do? If there's a sample code,
I'm sure there is.
haven't you written one?
Actually, there's not for this. I'm sure there's a demo somewhere. So animated widget base state extends implicitly animated. Okay, so the magic still happens in implicitly animated widget base state. Tween visitor wished. So tween constructor, signature for a tween factory. All right. Tween visitor, signature for callbacks to animated widget base state for each tween. So what is actually being done here? For each tween. Subclasses must implement this function by running through the following steps for each animatable facet in the class.
Cool.
So call the visitor callback with 3 arguments. The first argument being the current value of the tween object that represents the tween.
So tween. What?
So we have one tween. We're going to call. They want us to. They're going to give us a function, which is visitor, and we want to execute it once for each tween.
Okay. Do we return anything? No, we can't. So okay. So
we're going to call it. We're going to give it the tween. The second argument of type T being the value on the widget that represents the current target value of the tween. So where are you trying to point your tween?
What?
Okay, so it's like an animated container, right? You have a width that can animate, right? So if you bring in a new widget that has a new width, you're going to animate to that width. And so I think that is the value that's going to go in here. It's where are you trying to animate to?
So it's
value.
Okay. And so the first one is tween of T. Okay, so it's a color. It's not like 0 or 1. It's the color. So we are trying to, according to the widget's index, we're either going to color black or color blue, right?
Do you want to take that and put it into a property, stick it in the widget in case we need it again?
What?
Like the widget index, that bit. Do you want to make that like a getter on the widget?
Sure. So, okay.
Experimental episode, y'all.
Color. What did I call it?
Target color, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Equals, and I think you can have almost the same code you just had, right?
Yeah. Except the widget.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, index equals 0.
All right.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, because this.
Right.
Okay, so widget
Target
color, and the third one.
Okay. The third, and this is where it gets interesting, I think. The third being a callback that takes a value t, which will be the second argument to the visitor callback, and that returns a tween object for the tween configured with the given value as the begin value.
So it's gonna be. Give me the
functional programming for the win. Okay.
No.
So,
I just want tween visitor. What's that? Tween constructor, and tween constructor is this. Okay. So it takes the target value, which is the target value. Okay. And so that's a color in our case. And it returns which tween? Like a new tween that goes from there to.
That must be it. So I don't think our tween should be final. I think that tween is gonna change every time the widget changes.
We can return a new one, right?
No, I think we need to store it, right? Like this tween that we're keeping here.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna need to store whatever tween is constructed here.
Really?
I think so. take the return value from the callback and store it. This is the value to use as the current value the next time for each tween is called.
Oh, take the value return.
So every time we rebuild the widget, right, this state has to go, okay, I'm going to go from whatever I am to wherever I should be. And so there's a tween that's going to represent that. Right, we're going between those two values. And the next time we change the widget, it's like, oh, now I'm going to go between where I am now and the target value. And so I think that's what this constructor is for. It's making the new tween for us.
Okay.
So
it gives us this color though. It doesn't give us a tween. So we need to construct the color tween again.
Callback. Okay. Call the visitor with 3 arguments. Callback that takes a value t and returns a tween object for the teen. Okay. Callback takes a value t and returns a tween configured with the given value as the begin value.
So that means like color tween, which begins at the begin value is the color, and the end value is the widget target color, and we should return it.
There's got to be a sample of this in the SDK somewhere.
Okay, that doesn't work, but it doesn't crash. You showed me a code example yesterday. Would that be helpful?
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because every time they build a feature like this for the SDK, there's always like a demo or something for it.
Oh, take the value returned from the callback and store it. This is the value to use as the current value the next time. So I actually want to store the color. And then what?
Okay, here we go. Animated theme extends implicitly animated widget. Okay, so this is all it's doing. And this is so that we're an animated theme, wherever possible, steal code from the SDK. And it says underscore data, which is a theme data. Equals visitor underscore data widget data. Interesting. So look at what I'm assuming Ian has here. So this isn't even a tween. It's just a theme data. This underscore data, right? Wait, or is it a tween? Where did you go? It is a tween. Never mind. So this is a theme data tween equals visitor. You give it the current value, the new target, and then in this callback, he's just making a new tween with the new value. And I think maybe it's mutating it on the back end or something.
Okay.
So in our callback, it would take a color, and then all it needs to do is produce a new color tween with that as the begin, with the value it gets.
Okay, so we return the thing, and then we color tween. So that one we have widget data. Okay,
You got that, and then it's just new value becomes new tween with begin of that value.
All right. All right. So not storing. That's interesting.
You are storing it because we're doing it up there.
Yeah, yeah, but up there, yeah.
Okay.
But
I'm glad we're making this episode. This is
yeah. So we're basically doing color tween with just begin.
that's the part. Yeah, I want to know what is it doing with this little tween.
Value. Okay, color.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't want this. Also, I don't want this. And now, nope.
Are we using the color when we build?
Ah. Clever.
So wrapped up in the hard stuff. We're not actually, yeah.
Style. Okay. Is text style.
Knowing my luck, it probably still won't work after we do this, but I want to know what it's doing with that tween visitor.
Wait, where do I get the color? Is it?
That you would get from the tween, right?
Okay, yeah, sure. Color tween.
At least I think.
Value?
All right, back to
No.
evaluate.
Evaluate.
Okay, so here we go. So animated widget base state has, in the base class, an animation. And so you can do tween and then evaluate with the animation.
Okay. Now it works. So, let's see.
Oh, success.
We did it. Okay.
Don't really know why it's working.
Okay. Let us. Can we read the documentation again with what we know?
Now that it's working, we have a modicum
So
of confidence.
read it, and I'll be selecting things here. So
Okay.
we needed to override for each tween, which takes a visitor. We're the documentation to for each tween says.
Mm-hmm. So okay, for each tween, where is for each tween? It's down here, right? Yeah. So subclasses implement this function by running through the following steps for each animatable facet in the class. Call the visitor callback with 3 arguments. So the current value of the tween object that represents the tween. Initially null. Oh, I think we should.
Yeah, it's null now.
Okay, cool. The second argument of type T being the value on the widget that represents the current target value of the tween.
Right. Okay. So that's
So the tween you've got, the value that represents where you want to go with that tween, and the third being a callback that takes a value T, which will be the second argument to the visitor callback, and that returns a tween object for the tween configured with the given value as the begin value. And that's the weird bit. It's like, I'm curious why that step exists and what it's doing. Like, I understand what has to happen. Like, you need to make a new tween, right?
right. You know what I think happens? My crazy understanding is that they take the tween that you give them with the begin color, and then it makes a copy of it with the same begin but with a new end. So it creates like a new tween that's from like current color to the one that you want to animate to. And all of this just because we want to make sure that if I click too early, right? If I do like tick tick, it should animate to like, for example, half between black and blue, and then it needs to animate back from that half value. Hopefully. Anyway, it works. So, do we want to do something crazier than just changing colors?
Yeah, I guess we.
So one thing that we
there's all these
could
things
do-
we can mess with, right?
Yeah,
Now that
we
we got
could
this working.
like we could do like it goes through white, or it goes through transparent. So it's like instead of this is weird because you change the text and then animate to the next one. But we could do something like the color tween. How can we make a color tween that goes through a different color?
Well, we could define our own tween, right? We can make a class that
Oh,
extends tween bracket color.
that's
Bear in mind, I don't know too much about blending colors. That could be fun.
well, tweening in general. Like, okay, so let's do class.
Hmm.
How do you call it? Like something that goes through white.
Ghost fade or something.
Ghost fade, nice. Ghost fade tween. Extends or implements? Extends tween. Can we extend tween?
I think you need to give it like takes a generic value, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it takes its color. So it's a tween of color. Oh, and wow. Okay. I just want to extend.
So we have to lerp.
Oh.
Lerping is like we must lerp for ourselves now,
Yes.
right? Like that's the real magic that a tween is supposed to do, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it takes a color and a double T, and then typo really, and then we want to say, basically we have a color begin, color end, and then we probably want final color between, which is, for the sake of simplicity, white. And of course we need to go straight tween this begin, this and I think. Yeah, it probably should be 10. Okay. Wait a second. I just don't want to make. Okay, so yeah, let's call super here. Ah.
Just made the mistake of looking at linear gradient to see if we could steal some code from it.
I know.
It gets into some hardcore math pretty quick.
No, my plan is basically, like, if we're between 0 and 0.5, we do tween between begin and white,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest is.
Oh. Okay, you could like tween between two tweens.
Yeah, you could like, yeah, basically, like, do your stuff, tween something else, which is probably not the best way to do this, but
Right.
you know.
I mean,
Yeah.
animations get chained together all the time, right? Like that's
Right.
a.
Right. So we do want to, so if t is below 0.5, then we basically color tween between begin and
Can I make a suggestion?
yeah.
Is it possible we can use color.lerp directly
Oh.
and just skip the tween? Because the tween mainly just holds the two
Yes,
values,
yes. Good thinking. So that's gonna be begin.
right? Mm-hmm.
Can we make a new name instead of between?
Middle.
Middle, yes, thank you.
That works.
Middle, and then T like this. No, actually
T times 2, right?
times 2. And that would be return. And otherwise, that would be a very similar thing from
What was the
middle.
What was the keystroke you just did to duplicate a line?
Oh, Command D.
Really?
And, yeah.
Interesting.
And now, okay, so now math. So t is now more than 0.5 to 1, so we need to do t minus 0.5 times 2.
Yep.
Typo. Okay. So now we have Ghost Fade Tween. I love the name. And now this should be screaming at us. No?
Because we're still making, yeah, there.
Okay, should I?
Yeah, see what happens. Oh,
Uh-oh.
did something good. Oh, the state library is probably going to scream at us because it's trying to map a color tween to a. Now you have a ghost fade tween. You change the type and the state object, so we need to throw it away.
Okay.
Hey, it worked.
Nice.
Our ghostly fade.
Okay, so it still changes the. Okay, so we could just be lazy and do this.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Even though, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, we would like to. So my initial idea was that this either says news or top, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So like Flutter Hacker News, or new, or according to index. So this is kind of terrible, but Flutter Hacker News top. Current index. What could go wrong?
Yeah. No one ever overruns their buffers or array indices. That's fine.
Okay, so we have this, except it changes the name before we want to. So we need a new tween that gives you the first thing at first, and after t equals 0.5, it gives you the next one.
Ah, okay. So at halfway through, it just switches the string.
Yeah.
Okay. That's way less complicated than I thought you were going for.
Yeah.
So I'm relieved.
Okay.
I thought we were going to be talking like Levenstein distance and stuff like that.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So we need another tween. And now it makes sense to call visitor, right? Like, so we have a function that we can call on different tweens.
That's right. Yeah, this is.
So we can
good.
have a new tween here. That interpolates. Oh, what did you?
I think you accidentally deleted your tween.
Oh.
Let's make it again.
And this will be a tween between strings,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be basically like switch.
Yes. String tween. Yeah, whatever.
We don't need a middle. We do this.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, why is it? How is this working?
What do you mean?
It should begin. Right? I'm not even. Interesting. Anyway, see what I.
No, I totally do. What?
Anyway, it's working. It's fine. It's good.
We'll be checking some things out after we're done.
String begin, string end, and this will be easy. I like this. This will be just a string, and
It's just if less than.
Yes, 0.5. It's return begin, otherwise return end. Huh? Okay, create a new tween here. And use it.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to need to call that twice.
Switch strings. String is a visitor, and it's the switch. Yeah, I think I'm getting the hang of it. And now widget text. Right?
Yeah.
And
I was waiting for the next line.
and color. No,
Well, you
color.
just call it
is
str
val-
or something. Or
Right.
value.
Is this string tween with begin of value? Okay.
Yeah, you just need a semicolon.
And do we actually change this? Oh yeah, we do. Okay, so
And real quick, I think we're not using it in the build method, right? We're doing widget.text still.
yes. So that would be the switch string evaluate with animation. I'll restart.
I think it's working.
Yeah,
It seems to be
let's give
switching
it
when it
more.
hits the white.
Let's give it something like this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I like it. And we don't probably need to change the color, to be honest. It's kind of sad, but I'm probably gonna.
You're gonna
Yeah,
get rid of.
delete it.
Oh,
No,
it's the only color in the entire app.
that's right. Yeah, so maybe
yeah.
different than black, like this. Oh, yeah, we need
Angry
Will,
news.
yeah, or someone.
There you go.
But I like it.
Yeah. So
30 minutes, really?
there's one thing that we're using in here that I don't think we've made sure we understand, which is that evaluate call. We should touch on that because we can wrap this up in a minute, but we should touch on that. So where it's tween, evaluate, and then animation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is, because we talked about the animation controller, that goes from 0 to 1,
Mhm.
right? And then there's this animation that's also going from 0 to 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's providing the input for our tween. So what's the difference between the animation and the animation controller?
This is a good question.
I'm going to try and look it up if I can find it. Of course, there's a zillion things that involve. Oh, that ain't right.
Yeah, I think I need a like a.
Do you want to look it up in the code? Maybe just find it over here.
Like
just
what's
do it.
animation?
Go to definition. Yeah, just like somewhere in here. Yeah.
All right. So animation with the value of type T. So animation is typed. A value together with the status. Status indicates whether the animation is conceptually running from beginning to end or from end back to the beginning. Yeah, and there's also curves, which change, and I don't know.
Well, curve I understand because it's like a.
Yeah,
it's
but
just a like a tween of its own, right? Like it's just give me 0 to 1, and I'll give you a point on a 0 to 1 range, but it'll be different than the one you.
really, so curves are tweens.
I don't know. I don't think they are tweens. I think they're similar in
Right,
function.
right.
They just
Yes, that's
like
right.
a.
No, but
A tween goes like evenly from one to the other, whereas a curve defines like, oh, here we go quick, and then we slow down, and then we go quick again.
Yeah. It's basically, yeah, it's you give it 0 to 1, and it gives you 0 to 1, but different shape.
Yeah.
Not always 0 to 1, because it go like there's elastic curves and anyway. So so there's animation, which is listenable,
Mm-hmm.
and we change tweens. Yeah, so that's another thing. So you have a animation controller.
Mm-hmm.
You drive it with a tween, and that gives you an animation of that value. Like here. So you have animation controller, I think, is untyped. It just goes from 0 to 1 or something. Correct?
I think it is typed. Let me find out.
And then, assuming I'm right, then
Oh no, you're right. It's not typed.
So you give it different tweens, and then the controller is like, okay, so anytime I change from 0 to 1, hopefully, I will call this tween, or I will change this tween, and that's the animation.
Yeah,
Like
like the
a-
animation does the work of like a stream object almost. It manages, like, you put a value in here and you get whatever the animation calculates out to at the bottom.
Right. It's listenable. So listenable is like a very lightweight stream.
Okay.
So yeah. So that makes sense. And
the,
now,
the controller is an animation, which I think is interesting. Like, if you go look up animation controller, it extends animation
Okay.
because it's
It's
like
an animation
the first,
of double.
yeah.
Oh.
And so, like, it's the first one in the chain, and instead of it receiving its input from some other animation, like you would normally put these animation objects together in a little, like, string, right? It's the one all the way up at the top that has the, like, start method that says, okay, now I'm going to start putting values in. And it's also the one that listens for that ticker every time you're going to draw a frame, and it's like, oh, we need a new frame. Let me kick off a new value to figure out what the animation should be.
Oh, okay. And so with animation, you just say like dot value, and it will give you the current value. What we're doing here is something else. Where am I? It takes a tween and evaluates it with the animation, which is basically the opposite, but the same thing, but taken in the opposite, right? You're saying, here's a tween, and just transform now. Transform the. Oh yeah, okay. Transform the animation value with this. Right, that's the animatable.
What does animatable do? What's the actual? Is it just the transform method?
It's examples can. Oh wait. An object that can produce a value of type T given an animation double. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's a tween, basically. I think tweens are animatable, hopefully.
That would make sense.
Where's the tween? Here. Yes. Okay.
The funny part is, like, I don't think any of these patterns have changed for a long time. Like, this basic pattern of animation and how it works, I feel like exists not just in Flutter, but like in a number of other places.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same across all of them in terms of the concepts involved. And it's just like the first time that you go to learn it, that you have to sort of absorb all these entities and what each one does.
Well, I'm happy. So
Yeah, and you want to call it?
yeah, I want to call it.
Okay.
How about you?
Yeah, we produced a widget. I mean, that's how
That's awesome. Yes.
that's how the show works.
I wonder. Yeah, let's call it a day. So we've talked about all the things implicitly animated. To review, it's a widget. Basically, the cool thing about implicitly animated widget is how you use it. If you don't overcomplicate things like I do, you just like change the value here, right? Maybe I should just do this. This is kind of crazy. So it's 0, then this, otherwise that, and right. So that's all it does.
But yeah, we never had to make the animation controller. We never had to make the animation for ourselves. We skipped out on all of that. We skipped out on like ticker mix-ins and stuff like that. All we had to do was the tween to say, you need to go from here to here, and then the animated widget base state, not implicitly animated widget base state. That class took care of all the messy details of like making an animation controller and starting it and getting a ticker and all that stuff.
But like even before that, once you have the implicitly animated widget, this is the API. Like you just change.
Oh yeah, like this becomes dead easy once you've got.
Yeah.
Like,
Now you just like change the values.
one thing or another thing, and that's all you have to worry about.
Yeah, you don't care.
Which is the magic of animated container too, which is why I love it.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
Cool. Yeah. So thank you. Comments, please, in the YouTube video.
Let us know what still doesn't make sense after this, and we'll talk about.
I'm sure everything will make sense now.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you next time.